pleased to have this opportunity to visit you here in Delhi. And we can only stay 3 or 4 days, but your interest in our form of meditation and Luang Por Chah's teaching, this visit here is to encourage this interest, because you've shown so much keen interest in visiting us in Thailand, visiting me at Ratanawan and Luang Por Liam, Wat Pananachat. And it's one of the things that interest me is like so many of you have had so much experience with meditation already. And so that's, in the Goenka method, Goenka style. So that, is a good practice and gives you, obviously stimulated an interest in the Buddhist teachings. But Ajahn Chah's was very much pointing to the original teaching, the Dhammārama Sutta, and that was his first sermon, the Buddhist first sermon after enlightenment. And so this is what, I found most beneficial for me, is this reflection on those Four Noble Truths. You're turning them inward. It's not, you can memorize them in 5 minutes, doesn't take very long, because there's only 4. But the actual emphasis that Luang Por Chah had was to be, they're not doctrines or beliefs, so they're not to be grasped as Buddhist doctrine. They're very practical directions on how to be free from ignorance and delusion as a human being. And so in my own experience, it's a very powerful just that first sermon that the Buddha gave in Saranath after his enlightenment. And that, to me, I consider it's a perfect teaching. The directions are all there. And so, Luang Por Chah's emphasis was on patipada, or the practice, to make it, apply it to the present moment, and to see suffering not as some abstract or some personal identity, but to look at suffering and to receive the suffering, such as physical discomfort or mental anguish, to change your attitude rather than just trying to run away from it and seek happiness. So it's a very direct path, and one that there's much interest in this original teaching of the Buddha all over the world now, and he was opening monasteries in Brazil and Portugal and countries that you would think, would not have an interest in an Asian religion. But the Buddha's teaching is not about Asian culture. It's not a cultural teaching, and so that's why there are no doctrines. You're not supposed to, you're not encouraged to start from a doctrinal position. Like most religions start from doctrinal, kind of metaphysical belief in a deity and a God. But in Theravada Buddhism, the emphasis is on these Four Noble Truths. So this is about what we can all relate to. We don't have to believe in suffering. It's not, not something that anyone doesn't have, whether it's, in ancient India or modern India. The Four Noble Truths still apply to the human condition. So during this time, this short revisit, then, I've come here to bless, to encourage you all in this practice. And, over the years, because I've been a monk for so long, the clarity, increases. At first, it's hard, I found it very difficult to deal with anatta, no self, because it seemed like very much I am this body and I am this person, and this separation. I'm here and you're there, and so forth. So we, language and thinking always divide and separate. So. When you try to analyze Buddhist teachings, they can inspire the mind. They're intelligent teachings. They appeal to the intellect. But one has to apply them to your own conscious presence. And so, and this is what the practice at Wat Pah Pong Luang Por Chah's monastery was about. Before I learned the Thai language, it took me several years to be confident in listening to Luang Por Chah's formal talks, because they were always in Thai. But the direction was always be aware of the citta, or the state that you're experiencing right now, whatever it is, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. You're the ones that know that what you're feeling, what the mood that you're experiencing in this moment is like this. And this is not you're not told to have a special mood, or that you should strive to attain a happy state or happiness, but to use the First Noble Truth, the suffering, the dukkha, as a way of observing, because it's something we tend to not observe. We take it personally, we blame our suffering on others, and therefore we seek happiness, so we try to get rid of physical disease. We trying to find happiness in our minds. But with the First Noble Truth, we're no longer running away or blaming, but looking, observing. This is the nature of Buddha. Buddha means the awakened consciousness that's available to all of us. It's not, it's a teaching about the way things are, rather than about if you behave good in this life, you'll be reborn in a better state. That's a thinking kind of teaching. The Buddhist, the way that Luang Por Chah taught the Four Noble Truths was not about thinking, but observing. So the actual word Buddha means enlightened consciousness. And so that eventually, one has insight into anatta, not self. you begin to see the freedom of not being restricted and bound by your thoughts and memories and even your physical body, how we tend to see ourselves in very limited ways. And through the thinking mind, through memory, through experience, we have likes and dislikes. So many people now have problems with self-criticism, with guilt, with regret in their lives because they have failed or done things wrong, and then they see themselves in the terms of a judgment. Whereas sati sampajanya, mindfulness, is not a judgmental state. It's not about judgments of right and wrong, good or bad, but the way things are. So this is what I refer to as an intuitive approach. Intuition, or in Pali language, sati sampajanya, mindfulness, is our ability as human beings to realize ultimate reality, the Dhamma. So like the word Dhamma or Dharma is ultimate, translated to English like ultimate reality. But it's here and now, and we awaken to Dhamma. We begin to know Dhamma rather than just be caught in the cycles of habit, like and dislike, success and failure, and we tend to be caught in these cycles, and then you develop this conditioning through the cultural conditioning, through social conditioning, religious conditioning. We all are conditioned by what our parents believed in and felt and thought and did, as well as our social status, and this is a conditioned identity. Being a religion is a religious identity. These are all concepts, perceptions. They're all impermanent and not self. But the knower of this is the way out of that trap, of beginning to fully realize ultimate reality, or the amatta Dhamma, or deathless reality. And this is, within the human condition, this is what, like a fulfillment of our own humanity. That it's, that we're not just caught in a trap of rebirth, reincarnation, repeating, the same things over and over through one lifetime into the next. It's about liberation, total liberation from the delusions of identity, attachment to desires, to views and opinions, to memories. We all have biases, prejudices that come from our social conditioning or cultural conditioning. So like in my own experience, I was brought up as a Christian, an Anglican in America, and there, it's very much based on doctrine. Christianity is very doctrinal. You have to believe. The first thing you say is, I believe in God. Where the Buddha, in his first sermon, isn't saying, I believe in God. He says, there is suffering. There is the origin of suffering. There is the cessation of suffering. And there is the path of non-suffering. So he's taking the most banal, ordinary experience that every human being experiences, whether you're rich or poor, a king or a beggar, male or female. Suffering is is the common bond that we all share as human beings, making that into a truth. It's not absolute truth. It's a noble truth. And so this approach, if you really practice with it, and you're learning to trust your awareness. Really, this is my encouragement to anyone who's interested in meditation, because like living in England for so many years, people are, they don't have usually the Europeans that go to the retreats, they don't have a cultural, like a religious back. They're not from Buddhist backgrounds usually. So we have to deal with our own religious upbringing, and so a lot of it's like being Jewish, Christian, or today like an atheist or agnostic. But all these, as you begin to trust your awareness, your own cultural conditioning, what you've been told to believe, what you've been, acquired through the just growing up with your parents, with your society, with your ethnicity, with your religion, is like this. We're not making comments about judging it in any way. It's not about saying it was all wrong or we're better than that, but it's learning to look at, to observe, the very feelings and attitudes and biases with this awareness of them as impermanent, anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. So during this time here, it was meant as an encouragement, and I'm very impressed with the conditions. A very nice place, very suitable, and it looked like it's just been completed. Am I right? Ajahn Asoko, he's actually from a Buddhist family. That's rare. Most Europeans can't claim that. But I found in my own, my Christian upbringing was very good. So it wasn't, abusive or, it was quite liberal. Anglican Christianity tends to be quite liberal, very, very morally oriented, and but I found out when I became a teenager, I couldn't believe in the doctrines. Up to a certain age, you just believe what your parents tell you, or what the priest says, because you trust them that they know what they're talking about. And then, so I quite enjoyed, as a boy, as a child, going to church and being an acolyte at the altar, and the ceremonies. It was a very high Anglican church, and I found I quite liked to go to church and believe in Jesus and all the rest. But in teenage, 14 or 15, you start questioning. And one Sunday morning, when we were saying the creed, you say, in Christianity, when you say the creed, the first thing you say is, "I believe in God." And then I thought, I don't even know what that means. I don't know what God is. And so that was a doubt began to arise in my mind. Before that, I would just say that. I believe in God, and everybody seemed to believe in God. Then when I asked my mother or the priest, they said, you shouldn't doubt, you just believe, and doubting is sinful. And so when you're of a skeptic nature, you can't believe. The more they kind of threatened me into believing, the more doubts would arise. And when I encountered, my first encounter with Buddhism was with Zen Buddhism in Japan. And of course Zen is uses doubt, so you suddenly, because doubting is a result of thinking. And so I thought, this is a path I can actually follow, this Buddhist path, because it's not telling me to believe or saying I'll go to hell if I don't believe in God, but it's stating a fact that there is suffering. And even in my youth, from a very nice family and from the United States, so I had, had a kind of middle class background. So the suffering wasn't because of poverty or abuse of any sort from outside, but it was just the obsessive thinking, the doubting, the tendency to worry about the future. And as you're educated, then a lot of that discriminating ability turns inward. You see all kinds of flaws in your personality, and so when people get depressed and suffer a lot of dukkha just because of thinking too much. Where in this approach, it's an intuitive approach, sati sampajanya, panya, wisdom. It's through this awareness, that we can get beyond the conditioning that we've acquired in our lives. Some of the conditioning is good, some of it isn't, but it's still, one is bound to react to things, to have prejudices, to have fears, anxieties. And in modern life, and here in Delhi, I can't speak for you here, but in other places, in London or Bangkok or Seattle, there's so much mental anguish and fear in countries that are quite economically stable, and people who have enough to survive. They're not on the starvation level. So people take to drink, and drugs are a problem, and go to psychotherapists, have to deal with depression and guilt and fear. Well, these are all created by us through this ignorance of Icca. So this Buddho, this Buddha ability of awareness, is the way that we can resolve these habit patterns that we've developed in our lives, and no longer be deluded and obsessed and suffer from them. So I think if there are any questions.
यदि कोई हिंदी में प्रश्न पूछना चाहे तो हम इंग्लिश में ट्रांसलेट कर देंगे।
Ajahn, you spoke about the anatya dhamma, the infinite death. What can you elaborate a bit on that?
Like the word Dhamma is, you can't define it. You know, you can say, I think the best English definition is reality, awaken to reality. And so Dhamma is here and now, timeless. So it's not something you lack or is far away. It's just awakening to it. And so there's always this relationship, Buddha, Dhamma. Buddha knows the Dhamma. And so that kind of intuitive awareness, you begin to see, to know Dhamma in a direct way. You can't find it, it's not an object. So, you know, when you say, what is the Dhamma? You can use abstracts like ultimate reality, the words that are, you know, not very descriptive, but the best you can do with language, because language is limited, is a sankhara, is something that comes, is born and dies, but ultimate reality, or Dhamma, is ordinary, it's here and now. So mindfulness then is the only way that as human individuals we can actually know Dhamma, not as an object, but as the reality of our very being. Because you'll never find the Dhamma as an object. It's like God, the concept of God in Christian. You know, that people say, you have to show me God, and then you give God anthropomorphic qualities, like he's a big patriarchal figure, and but actually, you know, God is the, you know, what they really mean is Dhamma. It's here and now. It's timeless. And then we say encouraging investigation, meaning Bhatipatthana practice. Developing a confidence in an intuitive awareness. Because the thinking mind, when you think about Dhamma, then you'll never be quite sure what it is. So you take refuge, you know, in the Theravada Pali tradition, they have the Bhutang Saranang Gacchami, Dhammang Saranang Gacchami, Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. That's the ceremonial side. But that's not just a ceremony, it's not just reciting an ancient language as a kind of just part of tradition, but it's actually very meaningful. Because Bhutangs are not taking refuge in awareness, and Dhamma, here and now, it's like this, and then Sangha, those who practice Dhamma, who are cultivating that. So, you know, when you think, can you imagine the deathless reality, or deathlessness? When we say the deathless Dhamma, Mata Dhamma, you know, when you observe your way, your thinking, your ability to think, you can't conceive it. You have to use negations on, you know, so it's Dhamma, the deathless Dhamma, the Dhamma that isn't born and dies, or immortal Dhamma. These are like English, best we can do with the English language. But, you know, the thinking, and that takes you, increases interest, devotion, And it can also create disillusionment and doubt in the method, in the teacher, in yourself, in the tradition. But all of it is fair game for bhavana or meditation. Because even if you lose faith and doubt the teacher or the Buddha, or that is, we're seeing that is a condition, sankhara, arising and ceasing. Then you ask yourself, what is it that knows arising and ceasing? Who is it that knows the sankharas? And can a sankhara know a sankhara? This is like investigation. Can your right hand know your left hand? Or is consciousness, where both can be known in an instant, can be seen in an instant? So we're all experiencing consciousness. Every one of us is conscious being, and it's learning to trust that awareness that isn't created by us. It's not a state that is that we develop or cultivate as some kind of personal ability, but learning to trust yourself in awareness, in intuitive awareness. Because the modern society doesn't give any information on that level. It's all, modern education is all about acquiring knowledge from outside. So you go to university and get a PhD, and you've acquired a lot of information about science and art and so forth. Or you've gone to religious teachers and you've acquired knowledge of Buddhism and Hinduism, Christianity from outside, from scriptures or from Bibles or books. But this kind of knowledge is not about going out and trying to think about the meaning of Buddhism, but using the Dhamma teachings of the Buddha, because they're all pointing at Dhamma, here and now. They're not about the next life or in the future. And so you start with like Anapanasati, because that's happening here and now. The biggest delusion that binds us to birth and death is the identity with the physical body. We all believe, the cultures we come from all tell us we're this physical form. And that's what it seems like. That's how the conditioning that's how the conditioning takes place. You operate from I am Ajahn Sumedho and you're somebody else. And that's the conventional way of thinking and cultural conditioning. But in mindfulness practice, we're seeing that we create that division. And in England, I used to contemplate, when I'm asleep, am I Ajahn Sumedho? And then exploring this, my own thinking, that I assume I'm Ajahn Sumedho all the time, whether I'm awake or asleep or feeling good or not feeling good, whether I'm teaching Dhamma or just reading the newspaper, I'm always Ajahn Sumedho. And like Galung Bochar's always emphasized, that's conventional reality. But in the reality of the moment, for me to really be Ajahn Sumedho, I have to, it's a convention way of talking. But it's not a person. And so, when asleep, I'm not dreaming, even Sumedho. Because dreams are even more deluding than daily life. But these are ways of inquiring, finding out, how your thinking process works, the limitations of being able to reason, like modern education has developed reason and logic to a high level. They're always going out. They're talking about going to Mars and the moon and nanotechnology and microbiology and then going out into the universe or going into the minutiae of conditioned phenomena. But it's all this going outward that we do, that is very much, the sensual world. That's what senses do, you're looking and you go out to, and see something as separate. When you think about it, saying, I'm separate from you, because that's how it seems, and that's how we're conditioned to think and believe. And the conventional world, wherever, whether it's in India or England, that assumption is always there of separation. Where in intuitive awareness, mindfulness, it's not coming from thought anymore, or from reason and logic, but from wisdom. Universal wisdom, not personal knowledge about wise sayings.
माइंडफुलनेस आप बोलते हैं और विपश्यना, तो माइंडफुलनेस ही विपश्यना है और विपश्यना से मुक्ति पा सकते हैं क्या आप?
His question was, there is
Bhante, he was asking that is mindfulness the same thing as vipassana, and can one be liberated by practicing vipassana or mindfulness?
Yeah, vipassana means insight into reality. It may, it's instead of going out looking for reality, you're going inward. So the very word vipassana means insight, meditation, the satipatthana, the Four Noble Truths, the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, the paticca samuppada, the dependent origination, the Four Noble Truths. These are the basic, directional teachings. And so, it's a matter of, like with Luang Por Chah, before I could understand, or, I was the first Western monk with Luang Por Chah, and we lived in a very undeveloped part of Thailand, in Ubon, northeast Thailand. In those days, like 50 years ago, it was, the most backward part of Thailand. And it was quite a basic lifestyle we lived in. But I couldn't it took me a while to readjust from a city background in the United States. And suddenly you're in a forest monastery in northeast Thailand, and life is totally different, culture's different, climate's different, the diet is different. And so, you're having to adapt yourself to something. I was 32 years old at the time, and trying to adapt myself to something, a new culture, a new way of living, and in every new language. But during that first year that I lived with Luang Por Chah, his teaching was simple enough that I didn't need to have to really understand what he was talking in his formal desanas, but the direction was always to observe the state of mind. And so that I could do. And so when at least, most of us find it very frustrating when you're in a group where they're all speaking another language and you don't know what they're talking about. And then you have to spend 5 hours sitting listening to a Dhamma talk by Ajahn Chah, where everybody else is enjoying it except me. And I have physical pain, and all I do is want to get away and leave and have very negative feelings. But I could, through this observing, this Bhutto style, I could do that. I could observe this anger and restlessness. And so it was a very powerful first year for me, before I could really appreciate the formal teachings that Luang Por Chah would give. I could at least cultivate this in this simple way. I began this at one time. I was just, in physical discomfort, and Luang Por Chah was going on, and I thought, I'm fed up. I'm really fed up. I can't take any more of this. And then I saw what I was thinking. I thought, I'm not really fed up. And I can take more of this. But the habit, isn't it? These kind of thoughts and reactions come into consciousness through stressful situations or things of that kind, where we tend to limit ourselves by believing in our reactions, our emotional reactions. Because when I really stopped to look at it, there was a kind of habit pattern of when you get to this point and you think you're fed up, can't take anymore. But then through sati sampajanya, awareness of that, I realized that was just a feeling of the moment, an impermanent condition. And that was an insight, just a simple insight into the emotional reaction that I was experiencing. You get, when Thai culture is very different from American, so you feel, you get paranoid. Your mind produces paranoid thoughts. Because Thai people, they'd always be looking at me, and sometimes they'd all be looking at me and laughing because I'm tall, and then that would trigger off anger, either laughing at me, but the Thais are, they didn't have any bad intention in the laughter. But when you don't understand the culture, you tend to read into it all kinds of malicious thought, conditions and whatnot, and taking it personally. But through sati sampajanya, suddenly I realized, this is the way it is. And in a monastic setting, there's a lot of trust because you've got this vinaya, this discipline that you all agree to. So, you're in a very highly moral setting to live in, where you don't, you're not afraid. Everybody's trying to be as honest and trustworthy as they can. So in the society itself, you realize, like in a monastic sangha, your paranoid mind can still go on about, create scenarios of mistrust and being offended. But then you think, these monks I'm living with, they're here for the same reason I am. So, and then to see how I create this sense of being offended or upset, or feeling isolated, feeling left out, are emotions that I create. And just through this kind of awareness practice, you can break through a lot of ingrained emotional habits that we've acquired through childhood, through adolescence, through our lives. Just seeing through them. We're not getting rid of them or denying them, but we're not limited to the conditioning process that we've all experienced. So Buddha Dhamma is not another form of conditioning. It's not making you into Buddhists and conditioning you to grasp Buddhist teachings, but the aim of the practice is to use those teachings for awakening. Challenge yourself, and begin to see that you're not the limited creature you tend to perceive yourself to be. So my voice is giving out. So, take some rest.